I'm Carrie, and this is Student Loan Chit-Chat. Happy spring break if you're in the Tampa area. Today is Tuesday, March 14th, 2023, and congratulations to one of my dearest friends who just had her student loan forgiven under the PSLF, also known as Public Service Loan Forgiveness Waiver. I am so happy for you. This episode's dedicated to you. All right, so what I want to talk to you today about is with the student loans coming back, and guys, it's not looking good, at least if you look at the analysts on the news about the Supreme Court decision that we're all waiting for, which could still take, keep in mind, it could still take a couple of months, but it's not looking good about forgiveness. I'm going to say I'm about 80-20, so about 80% chance that they probably won't forgive it, 20% they might. Remember, it's the 10,000, 20,000, the 20,000, I believe, is those who have Pell Grants, okay? Of course, these deal with federal loans only, not private. So, we'll keep an eye on it, and as soon as I know, you'll know. But it's not looking good. So if it is approved, it'll be a very, very pleasant, miraculous surprise indeed. So as people are gearing up to pay off their student loans, and also those who are perhaps looking for their very first job, something to consider, all right? A lot of people, as we know, have student loans. A lot of you guys out there are looking for your first job, possibly out of college, or maybe, even you're just thinking of re-entering the workforce. But this is really going to be from the angle of young people going out and looking for their first job. Something to consider. Yes, you want a job that pays as much, as most would say, humanly possible. But there is something to consider, and that is that perhaps, just perhaps, the job that pays less may actually allow you to take home more. Let me repeat. The job that pays less, okay, it's not as lucrative, it's not as fancy, it may actually allow you to take home more. Let me explain. So, let's say you're given 2 job offers. One's in a designer city. When I'm talking designer cities, I'm talking your big cities, Seattle, Los Angeles, New York, okay? Maybe even, a city like Dallas, okay? But some jobs in big designer cities cost designer prices to maintain those jobs. Anytime you take on a job, don't just look at the amount that the job is going to pay you, be it salaried, okay, or hourly. But let's just kind of take this from a salaried, because chances are if you have pursued a degree, you're looking for a professional, okay, you're looking for that professional line of work. So let's kind of just take it from a salaried standpoint, all right, versus hourly. But you may find that the job that pays more is actually going to have you take home what? Less. Here's why. A job that pays more, oftentimes, not always, because I can tell you coming from a teacher standpoint, it's definitely not always, but let's just say on a general scale, okay? And I'm not thinking really in terms of public service positions, I'm thinking more in terms of corporate jobs, all right? And I spent around 15 years in corporate. But oftentimes, a job that pays more is also going to expect you to work more hours. You are not going to be working 40 to 50 hours a week. You may find yourself working 60, 70, yes, upwards of 80 hours a week. So a job that pays more, you have to ask yourself, how many hours in general am I going to be putting into this job? Because you may find that on an hour per hour basis, you're actually making less. Now, can you determine that necessarily before you get into the job? No, not necessarily, but you can do your due diligence, do your homework, and find out, honestly, in that industry, how much money do people make, but in return, how many hours do they work? So let's say, a job offers you $80,000 a year, but they want your full, weekdays, weekends. They want you to carry a beeper, a buzzer. In other words, you're making $80,000 a year, but you're working the equivalent of 2 jobs. Yeah, you take home more, but you owe them more as a result. Whereas somebody else might make $50,000 a year and they work maybe a job and a few extra hours and they're done. Ask yourself, how much is this job actually costing me? But it's not just in terms of how much it's costing you per hour, but it's also what is it costing you emotionally? Are you going to be so stressed out that you're going to wind up, and this really does happen, you're going to wind up spending it on a therapist's couch trying to sort out your life and where it went wrong because, yeah, you're in a job that pays you $100,000 a year, you're 27 years old, and you just banking it all in, but you also realize you don't have much of a life. Okay, you can't make new friends. You can't do anything with the friends you have. It's all about work, work, work. And while that can be advantageous while you're young, it may become more difficult as you get older. And here's another problem. When you take on jobs that, yes, are lucrative and pay a lot when you're young, you may also find that the golden handcuffs are put on you much earlier and can actually backfire. What do I mean by the golden handcuffs? Well, it's actually a business term, and it basically means the company has got you in such a position that you are beholden to the company in such a way that you can't afford to leave the job. Why can't you afford to leave the job? Because you have to support that fancy car, you have to support that fancy condo in the fancy city that you're living in, or that oversized house that perhaps you bought at too young of an age before you really decided you didn't want to live in this part of the country or this part of the world and you'd rather go live somewhere else. In other words, taking on a job that, yes, it may pay more, but ask yourself, okay, honestly, what do you owe to have taken on that job? There are people who are young, and you see it on social media all the time, flashing their latest trip on the yacht, flashing their latest trip to the Bahamas, flashing, their latest outfit, handbags, whatever, okay? It looks wonderful. It looks like, it's just a life of leisure. But in reality, many of them, even young ones in their 20s, they're going to have a tough time when they lose that job, when they lose that income. And I'm going to be honest, folks, young people, the way the world is going, it's not a matter of if you're going to be laid off at some time. You probably are going to be, especially if you're going the corporate route. Now, if you're going public service where it's not quite as lucrative, it's more steady, tends to be, like my parents, never a job layoff in all their years of education. And it didn't matter what angle of education they went into. Nobody ever got laid off. But my parents weren't corporate people. But if you're that, if you're chasing that white collar tech industry, the tech industry that looked like it was just, everybody's dreamland, and now it's kind of slowly falling apart in certain aspects, okay? You begin to realize there's no loyalty. There is no loyalty in corporate jobs, none at all. So when you are given a job offer, ask yourself, what do you have to do to maintain that job in the eyes of the people who are also in that industry? Okay, if everybody in that industry is driving a fancy car, even though they may not be able to afford it, are you going to be pressured to do that? Now you've got a car payment that is higher than what you would have had if you had, say, taken a job that, doesn't pay as much. It isn't as flashy, it isn't as fancy, but yet it's still in the industry you would like to be in. It's just not in maybe as big of a city. It's not in as fancy of a neighborhood, whatever, okay? So be asking yourself, if I take this expensive job, what am I going to have to sacrifice, okay? I can tell you, I remember when I was in my 30s, and I had some acquaintances. They weren't really friends of mine. It was just more of acquaintances at a social. And I remember they were in their late 20s. Now, you keep in mind, I'm in my 30s, okay? So this is like 20 years ago, all right? 25 years ago. And I remember them telling me they were pulling in six figures. Now, you're talking pulling that in. That was a lot of money. It was a lot of money. It's not the six figures in today's dollars. It was six figures, 25 years ago. They were raking it in. But I also realized something. They worked 80 to 100 hours a week. And I remember her telling me that, oh yeah, we work 7 days a week. We basically work sun up to sundown, nonstop. That's all they did. I mathematically did it. And I went, technically, they weren't making any more per hour than what I was making. They just basically held two jobs. That's all. It would be no different than somebody coming to you and say, hey, you know what, instead of us paying $50,000 for you to work 40 hours a week, we're going to pay you $100,000, but you now basically owe us your life. And here's another issue. With taking a job that may, require you to have a higher lifestyle. How easy are you going to be able to adapt to change if you have to pull that lifestyle back? And you may say, oh, no problem. Really? Is it really that easy when you're young? Your social circle has been built on people that are all in this lifestyle change, and then one day you realize you're overspent, you're out tapped, okay, you got no money because it's all going to fancy cars, clothes, houses, it's all going to wine parties, dinner parties, all right, and you all of a sudden realize that, you know, your credit cards are maxed out and everything you're doing is really to put on a show for the job, and then you have to pull back. How many of those people are still going to be your friends when you can't afford, or you choose to no longer afford, trying to live that lifestyle? It is possible that you taking on a job that actually pays less, but you owe them less, may actually get you financially ahead. You're not going to feel so much that you have to keep up with the Joneses. You know, that phrase of, you know, keep up with the Joneses. You're trying to be as, you know, highfalutin as your neighbors, or as highfalutin as, you know, the people you work with, okay? You may find that not having to keep up with the Joneses in a career may actually allow you to take home more. You see, you should judge a job, in my opinion, at this age, less by how much you make and more of how much do you get to keep. I can make more, but do I have to give 80, 90 hours of my life per week to the job? So basically, I'm not keeping my life, I'm giving it, you know, to the corporation. I may make more, but does it cost me more to have a fancier car? So when I pull up to the office in my, you know, what is in the fancy neighborhood that the high rise is in, I don't look like the one that was standing out. True story. True story. I remember when I worked at an insurance company in Lake Oswego, Oregon, which shall remain nameless because it's not relevant at this point in my life. And it was my very first large corporate position. You're talking insurance, corporate office. And I drove, this is in the what was that? I was 27, okay? So it's like 1986, right around there. Maybe a little, actually 1996, excuse me, a little bit later than that, okay? But I drove up in my Datsun B210, you know, a little hatchback. If I can find a picture of it, I'll stick it up here in the video, okay? It was a Datsun B210, 1990. It was so light, the car was so light that literally I had to put kitty litter in the back, you know, bags of kitty litter, so that when I drove on the freeway, I would drive between Portland and Eugene, because my family, I was raised in Eugene. Without kitty litter in the back, when it was windy outside, the car would fishtail, like the car would just kind of go back and forth, okay? And so to keep the car from fishtailing in wind, that, you know, the slightest wind on the freeway, even a truck coming by, semi-truck coming by could cause the car to fishtail. So to keep the car from fishtailing, I dumped kitty litter in the back, and it worked, okay? I remember when I pulled up, and this was my first corporate job, very suit and tie, very, very conservative company. Men weren't even allowed to wear beards at the time, all right? And I pulled up, and I remember a couple of the managers, I won't say laughing at me, but for lack of better, yeah. They commented about my car and basically how this car didn't belong in this type of environment. And Lake Oswego, for those who may not be familiar, is considered a wealthy town. At least it was at the time, and I'm sure it hasn't changed. It's considered one of the wealthier towns in Oregon. Okay, it's a money town, all right, like a little mini San Francisco, I guess, of Oregon, right? It's outside of Portland, just about 10-15 minutes. Well, I got comments on this car just didn't blend in, you know, and I was parked next to more expensive vehicles. But the sad part is that car is what I could afford. That's what I could actually afford. It was paid off. I think my mother and I did it together. She took out a loan from the credit union. She paid for a small portion of it. I was expected to pay the rest of it off, and I did. I could afford it. But the problem is the job that I was in basically did not approve of it, and it had to be changed. What is your job that may pay you more? What is it going to cost you that you would not otherwise have had to spend? Okay, what is that job going to cost you? And when that job costs you your life, your emotion, your time, and I remember working in radio, and I worked 80 hours a week. Let me tell you something. 80 hours a week is a lot. It's 2 full-time jobs, and believe me, I wasn't paid well for it, okay? But it's a lot. You basically give up your life. You only go home to sleep and maybe have a meal, and it's right back to work again. Okay? What is that job costing you in medical? Are you sick more frequently? Do you have more migraine headaches? Is your stress level up? Do you have to see a psychiatrist more? Are you in the doctor's office more? Do you have to have bigger trips, fancier clothes? When you are on break, those rare breaks that you get, bigger trips that would have been smaller trips if you weren't so stressed out. Clothes that were still nice, but didn't have to be as fancy because you're not feeling like you have to reward yourself. In other words, more pay means more of you is given to someone else. And what are you going to have to do to pay yourself back to make yourself feel whole? One of the things that I have found as I've gotten older, is really you have to find that balance. And you have to find at what level is peer pressure, gonna balance with your lifestyle and your needs. And the peer pressure to upgrade my car was great. And I did upgrade my car, and that's another video for another day as to what happened with that. But basically ask yourself, is it better to perhaps take the job that is less pay, but isn't going to require the lifestyle maintenance and upkeep? A maintenance and upkeep, as I was saying earlier, that you may find yourself in debt in and is not so easy to get out of. In other words, the person who comes out of college and takes a job that is not as financially lucrative could actually, in the long run, fare better, do better than the person who takes the higher paying job and immediately jumps in that lifestyle. I got the car, I got the house, I got the condo, I got the trips, okay? I have the handbags and all of that, and that lifestyle immediately shoots up to that. Whereas the other person who took the lesser paying job is not having to maintain that lifestyle. Actually learns at a very young age how to live within a budget, isn't pressured by social media or their corporation that they work for to have to show off, brag, whatever it is, okay, that they're doing. The person who takes the lesser job may, in the long run, we're talking the long game here, okay, in the long run may actually do better. When times get tight, they can tighten up. They know how to do it. They didn't overbuy in a car. They didn't overbuy on a house. All their friendships aren't based on, what place are we going to next? How much are we spending? Who's expected to pick up the bill? Because after all, these are supposed to be all your friends and you're all supposed to be rich, right? So when you go to a restaurant, somebody's expected to go, oh, this is all paid for on me. So think about that. When you are offered a job, don't just look at the pay that you're getting for the job. Look at what you're going to have to give up to maintain that job, because you may find that the handcuffs are put on you very early. I guarantee you, there are people that are young, making a lot of money, I guarantee it, who will have a very, very hard time downsizing. And we're not just talking a hard time downsizing from the emotional end, but just economically. It's like, wait a minute, my job just laid me off, or they're cutting back my hours, or even if they're keeping me, they're transitioning me to another position. It doesn't pay as much. But the problem is I bought the BMW, okay, and I had this really nice house I have to upkeep, and I'm supposed to go on this trip, to the French Alps or whatever, all right? That can be very, very difficult to get out of. Now, some people may say, oh, but that's a problem I would love to have. No, it's not. It's not a problem you want. Okay, it's really, really not. It's something you want to think about. So take a job because you believe it will balance your life. And especially when you're new in the workforce, it's going to take you a while to figure out what is a life balance. Some people do fine at 60-hour-a-week jobs. Their lifestyle lends it really well. Other people may find, no, that's really not what I want. But no matter what you do, make sure, especially in those early years of working, make sure those handcuffs are not put on you so young that, yeah, the job pays great, but you also realized you can't leave it. You can't afford to leave it. I read in a book once, during some of my difficult financial phases of life, and it said, The point that you cannot afford to leave is the point that you can no longer afford to stay. It was actually dealing with relationships, but that's basically what it was. The point that you can no longer afford to leave that relationship, that's the point you can no longer afford to stay. Well, I think the same could be said about jobs. The point that you can no longer afford to leave the job, that's the point you can no longer afford to stay, because it means basically you are no longer in control of it, but someone else is. Always maintain control of your job, which, by the way, let's swing back really quickly to public service loan forgiveness. Okay, it's why public service loan forgiveness, I believe, is so important, because you have people who are public service workers, and what are they? They're trapped. They're literally trapped in their jobs. They can't afford to leave. I have a friend who just got her public service loan forgiveness letter, and I'm just so happy for her. And you know who you are. I'm so proud of you. And one of the first things she said is one of the first things I thought to myself: I don't have to be here. I can choose to leave if I want. And I'm here because I'm here 100% voluntary. I'm here because I love it. I'm here because I'm passionate about what I do. Okay, I'm here because I think I make a difference. It's not I'm here because I can't leave. And when we talk about public service workers, that's what we really want, isn't it? We want people who are there because they want to be there. You want teachers in the classroom because they want to be there. You want people in the military because they want to be there. Not because they feel chained there. Not because they feel like they can't leave because they've got this debt hanging over their head. Okay? So anyways, something to think about, especially with young people as you are getting ready. Some of you, maybe even a lot of you, you're getting ready and you're searching for that first job. And remember this, it's not a matter of if you're going to get a job. You will get job offers. You will. It'll take time. Okay, some people get it faster than others, and that's okay too. There's nothing wrong with that. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. All right? But just remember, what is it that you have to give up? And if you can, be honest with yourself. Look at what it is that you really want in life. Do you value family? Maybe you really want a family. Okay? Perhaps that job that pays more in that really expensive designer city is just going to have you go broke. And you may find that you will actually take home more if you take a job that pays less. It isn't quite as flashy, but you actually more of your life back. Anyways, I hope this gives you some food for thought. I'm Carrie. This is Student Loan Chit-Chat. Thank you so much for joining me. I do hope you will consider subscribing and have a beautiful afternoon. Bye.